Mets fans, I have one simple question for you. What's it going to take for you to believe in this team again?
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Now, the Philadelphia Phillies officially clinched the National League East for the second straight season. They beat the Dodgers in extra innings on Monday night, and I was watching the whole thing. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment, and so as I was preparing the show, watching that game go down to the wire, and then I continued to watch. I watched all of the post-game show, the champagne shower, all of it. And when the analyst on that post-game show brought up the Mets, it was with a chuckle, a lighthearted remark. They talked about how the Phillies were the best team in baseball, how they are destined to win the World Series, talking way more brashly and confidently than I feel like a Mets post-game show would have done. But hey, I could be wrong. Maybe on SNY, had the Mets won the division this year, they would have proclaimed them the best team in baseball, destined to hand the trophy to John Middleton where it rightfully belongs. They said that on the postgame show, which was wild to me, but at the same time, they've earned that because since the Mets swept the Phillies at Citi Field, they won 14 of 18. Harrison Bader's been unbelievable. They've just rolled, and now they're in prime position for a first-round bye yet again. Beating the Dodgers on Monday night was a big step to go towards doing exactly that, as the Dodgers are the team that's chasing them for a first-round bye. The Phillies' magic number to get a first-round bye in the playoffs is now 7, and if they beat the Dodgers one more time in this series, it drops to 4 because they would then have the season series over the Dodgers. So they would get one game off that magic number for winning one game off the magic number for the Dodgers losing, and then another for getting that tiebreaker. So the Phillies are going to have a bye. The Brewers are likely going to have a bye. The Dodgers are probably going to host the team that gets the final wildcard spot, and right now the Mets are the favorite to do exactly that. So that leads me to ask you, the fans, what's your confidence level if the New York Mets can go into LA and beat the Dodgers in a wildcard round? The same team they squared off against in the NLCS, and it is a testament or a statement about these two teams that they would be squaring off in the wildcard round this year, as both of them have been a disappointment to their lofty expectations. Going into this season off of the offseason that each of those teams had, they might have been the two favorites in the National League. And yet, the Dodgers have disappointed, yet they're probably going to win their division. They just won't get that bye, and they'll be in the wild card round. I'm thinking probably for the first time under the new format. I can't imagine they've been there before. Last year, the Padres were the wild card team, right? Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the Dodgers beat the Padres, and then they squared off against them, obviously, in the division series. I think they won that division, of course. So, yeah, it would be a surprise for them not to have a bye, but that's what we're looking at. So if you look at the outcomes that are left for the Mets this season, that's the most likely one, that the Mets are going to have to go on the road and try to take 2 games in Dodger Stadium. And what have the Mets shown us over the past 3 months that would indicate that they can actually pull that off? So in the next segment, we're going to talk about what they have to do to make us believe, but I also want to talk about where this race is with us now sitting here, 4 series left to play, 12 games left in this season. What are the chances the Mets can even get to that playoff series? Well, they're still pretty good. Now, the other outcome is the Padres could still beat the Dodgers in that division, so you could be going to Petco instead. The Padres are 2 games back of the Dodgers, but to get there and to actually beat them in the West, they probably are going to have to stack some wins against the Mets early this week, and that could lead to the outcome that we all fear, which is that the Mets miss the playoffs altogether. Now, the Giants lost on Monday night against the Diamondbacks, which I think was a good thing for the Mets, but their magic number stays the same. It's at 11 with 12 left to play. Now, for those of you who aren't as up to date on what a magic number is, basically how you calculate it is you look at the team that is closest to you in the standings when it comes to making the playoffs, and you have to factor in the tiebreakers, but how many wins do the Mets need to get where the team that's closest to them can't possibly pass them? So for the Giants, the Mets have the tiebreaker. So their magic number when it came to Mets-Giants was 11, and the Giants lost to the Diamondbacks. So now it's 10. If the Mets win 10 more games, the Giants can't possibly catch them, even if they win everything. But you still have the Reds and the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks are now a game and a half back on the Mets, but they have one game less to play than everyone else. The Reds won against the Cardinals, so they're sitting 2 games back, tied with the Giants. Again, both those teams being at 500. But the Reds and the Diamondbacks are both right now in line with the tiebreaker. The Diamondbacks probably get it. The Mets split their season series against Arizona, but the next thing up after season series head-to-head is who has the better record against their own division, and the Diamondbacks are currently pacing to get that tiebreaker. The Reds obviously won the season series, so the Mets don't have it there. Bottom line, the Mets right now, if they won 11 games, they would get to a total that nobody could catch them with at 88. Now, anytime that the other teams lose, your magic number drops along with every time you win. So it doesn't mean the Mets need to win 11 more games. It just means that they control their destiny, because if they do win 11 more games, they are in. Now, when we look at the teams chasing the Mets, what do we want to see happen, particularly in this series with the Diamondbacks and the Giants beating up on each other right now? I think you want to see the Diamondbacks continue to win because they have a gauntlet coming up. After the Giants, they're going to play the Phillies, who, again, I still have that first round bye to push for, and then still home field to push for, because they could edge out the Brewers and end up with the best record in the National League, if not the best record in baseball. So they still got things to play for this week, and that's going to be the series that the Diamondbacks face over the weekend. They then have to square off against the Dodgers, and they close their season against the Padres. So I think the Diamondbacks have the toughest path. The Giants have 4 in LA against the Dodgers after playing the Diamondbacks. So they got the toughest week maybe. Their final week, though, they're going to host the Cardinals and the Rockies. So they might have a chance to try to have a great homestand at the end and try to make it at the 11th hour. The Reds have the easiest path because they're playing the Cardinals right now, and they won on Monday night again. They have 2 more in St. Louis. Then they host the Cubs for 4, host the Pirates for 3. Then they finish off their season in Milwaukee, but the Brewers might have nothing to play for at that point other than that potential home field advantage if they end up against the Phillies in the NLCS. But they're not going to be pushing in that final series. But it still comes down to the Mets. Can they have a good homestand and put themselves in a prime position going into that final week of the season? I know angst-ridden Mets fans are not going to like me saying this, but you look at the Mets schedule, they play the Nationals and the Marlins. That does mean they have potentially an easier schedule than all of these teams. It's just the fact that the Marlins have been a little frisky against the Mets, and you never know with the Nationals. When you play a team in your division, it's not the same as if the Mets had the Rockies and the White Sox on their schedule. I'd feel better about that. Now, there's still one more crazy outcome that could happen. If the Mets sweep the Padres, they would actually drop to only 2 games back of San Diego in the wild card race. So theoretically, they could still grab that second wild card spot, which would likely put them in a series against the Cubs, which would be made a little more favorable than going up against the Dodgers. But the Padres already swept the Mets this year, and they have been much better in their division than the Mets have been against the National League East. So the chances of the Mets having the tiebreaker are slim. So the Mets would have to beat the Padres outright, and that's just not likely. Coming up short of sweeping this homestand and then taking both of the next series on the road, I mean, this is the only path that you could get there. The Mets finished off their season going 10-2 and got to 87 wins. The Padres would have to drop 8 of their final 12 or 5 of their final 9 if the Mets did sweep them. So again, we cannot count on that. The bottom line is, with 12 games left to play, the Mets have to handle their own business and hope some other things go their way. But they are likely staring at a wild card series against the Dodgers. So my, again, question to you all, can they do enough in the next 2 weeks that you go into that series believing that the New York Mets are going to win it and actually make a real playoff run? That's what we're going to discuss in the next segment. Today's episode is brought to you by Nutrafol. You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. There are so many products out there, it's just hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything. That's why you should give Nutrafol a closer look. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand trusted by over 1.5 million people. It's not just hype. This is a supplement clinically tested that targets the root causes of thinning and shedding with a proactive approach. Whether you're at work, out with friends, or even just getting ready in the morning, Nutrafol is going to give you more confidence in your daily routine. And you can feel good about it knowing that Nutrafol is NSF certified and backed by peer-reviewed studies. See thicker, stronger hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Locked On MLB listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. This is the final week of Mets baseball at Citi Field for the 2025 regular season. You got to get out there and support the Mets. And if you want to go last minute, you don't have tickets, you got to go to Game Time, because Game Time is going to make buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. So you can get incredible last minute deals. You can find clear seat views and a lowest price guarantee that takes all the worry out of buying your tickets. And Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game like Mets versus Padres tonight. Game Time has last minute deals and zone deals for big savings, so you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. I would love to get there by the end of the season. That was the goal. I really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. And also, make sure you check out our Locked On Mets postcast. Chris Schubert should be live tonight after the Mets square off against the Padres. If you want to get that immediate reaction after the game, make sure you check out the postcast. So now let's talk about what has to happen for Mets fans to believe in this team going down the stretch, to actually feel like they can be a team that makes a run and wins a World Series this year, which seems completely unfathomable. But as I said on yesterday's show, the Arizona Diamondbacks went to the World Series a couple years ago as an 84-win team. So crazier things have happened. In this new format, you really never know. So I got 4 different things that need to happen for Mets fans to believe in this team. And these are not ranked in order, although I can give you an order at the end on what I think is the most important. The first one, though, finding 2 more arms that you're happy handing the ball to in a playoff game. Because Noel McLean, that one is locked in. But who else are you going to trust in a playoff start? Last year, the Mets went with Luis Severino in Game 1 of the wildcard round. Sean and I got Game 2. Jose Quintana got Game 3. Sevy was pitching to a 3.91 ERA at the time, and in the second half, a 4.11 ERA. Manaea was unbelievable down the stretch. We all know that. And Quintana was riding a heater through September that carried over into October, and obviously he was a vet that had been there before. Compare that trio, though, to this year's rotation. The Mets don't have anyone outside of Noel McLean that's rolling going into the playoffs, but David Peterson has had a better season than Luis Severino. Jose Quintana is the vet that the Mets are missing right now, but can they find 3 starters at least that they like in a wild card round? Again, it starts with Noel McLean. And the more I look at the schedule, I think he's probably locked into a game 2 start, even though he's still the Mets ace. The only reason I say that, he's lined up to pitch on Saturday. He would then pitch on Friday in Miami. And to get him in line for game 2, it would be on 4 days rest. So either the Mets would have to start him on 4 days rest next week to give him 5 days rest for a playoff start, or they would go with him on regular rest for him, 5 days rest on the final week of the season, then have him go on 4 days rest for a playoff start. Or if the Mets are able to win a bunch of games, then maybe they could shuffle things up and have him even fresher for a potential playoff start. But I'm saying McLean is going to start game 2 if the Mets can get there. So who's going to start game 1? David Peterson is in line to pitch a game 162 on regular rest if the Mets need it, which means he would be going on 6 days rest, potentially, if the Mets didn't need him in a game 1 of a wild card round. And to me, he is still the favorite to make that start. The only other guy that you can look at, it's either Brandon Sproat, Sean Manaea, and Clay Holmes in this piggyback that we're going to see tonight, or Kodai Senga if he looks really good in his second start in Syracuse and he comes up next week and starts in place of Jonah Tong, he would be in line to pitch on 5 days rest in game 1 of a wild card round. So those are the Mets options. So for fans to believe, they need David Peterson to have 2 really good starts to close out this season. So he's riding that momentum and hopefully doesn't have to pitch in that game 162. And he's lined up ready to rock in game 1 of the wild card round. And then you have Nolan McLean for game 2, game 3. It could be Brandon Sproat. It could be Clay Holmes and or Sean Manaea, or it could be Kodai Senga. But I think David Peterson to me is the guy that needs to figure it out because he was your all-star this year. He's the one that you could really buy into more than anybody else. So that is, to me, the biggest thing on the rotation front over these next couple weeks is David Peterson has to return to form. And then ideally, so does Kodai Senga. Now, my second overarching thing that has to happen for Mets fans to believe in this team, they got to get the Ryans right. And by the Ryans, I'm talking about Ryan Stanek and Ryan Helsley. Stanek had a huge appearance to help the Mets get that win on Sunday, keeping the ghost runner off the board in extra innings so that the Mets did not have to feel the pressure of being down in the bottom of that 10th inning and then Pete Alonso deliver that one big swing. If Stanek can build off of that and do what he did last year, which was largely pitch awful after the trade deadline, and then right at the very end of the season and then riding into the playoffs, he found it. The games really matter right now. Maybe this is where you see the best of Ryan Stanek. And if it is, that is so big for this team because I feel really good about Tyler Rogers, feel really good about Brooks Raley, and obviously I feel great about Edwin Diaz. To have Ryan Stanek in the fold, that would all of a sudden make this bullpen deeper than the one last year because last year the Mets made it to game 6 of the NLCS with Edwin Diaz, Ryan Stanek, and a whole bunch of question marks. Reed Garrett was probably the next best guy. Phil Maton, who was great in the regular season, fell apart in the playoffs, as did Jose Budo, and the Mets were just grasping for straws. David Peterson was honestly probably right there with Stanek as the best relief option the Mets had. So getting Stanek right would be big. Getting Ryan Helsley right as well would finally give the Mets what they thought they bought at the deadline, which is that super bullpen that could help a rotation that's shaky. So getting the Ryans right is big. My third thing the Mets need to do to get fans to believe, this lineup needs to get back to playing up to their potential. We saw it throughout August. They were a great offensive team. It slowed down. Pete Alonso had a big home run. Can he get hot? Can Mark Vientos and Juan Soto stay hot? And same goes with Francisco Lindor, but can he maybe find his power stroke again? Well, he's only homered a couple times over his last 30 games or 30 days here. I think it's 2 home runs over the last month for Lindor. So can he find that power stroke again? And obviously, Brandon Nimmo's another guy that can really contribute, but has gone through a little bit of a slump over the last 2 weeks. The final thing that I think has to happen for Mets fans to truly believe that this team can make a run is to clinch by game 160. If the Mets can beat the Padres and sweep the Nationals and have a great finish to this homestand, then they can go to Chicago and beat the Cubs. All of a sudden, that magic number can drop a bunch. That would be 7 wins. So then any combination of 4 losses from the other, well, not any combination, but 4 losses from the Reds, 4 losses from the Diamondbacks, and 3 losses from the Giants means the Mets would clinch before they even got to Miami. And that would be ideal. Because going into that series against the Marlins, needing games is not a place you want to be. Needing one game, okay. Needing multiple games, that will be dicey because the Marlins are a frisky team. And that would mean you have to pitch Nolan McLean, and you might have to pitch David Peterson, and you might exhaust the few good options that you potentially have for a wild card round. So that's why I say that fourth one is a big one. Can you clinch by game 160? And there's a chance with the Diamondbacks, still having the gauntlet that's in front of them to see, the Giants have to go against the Dodgers this upcoming week. And again, for the Diamondbacks, they got to face the Phillies. The Reds, a little bit tougher, but the Reds aren't that good of a team. If the Mets handle business at home and are able to beat the Cubs at Wrigley, which are 2 massive ifs, but we're talking about what has to happen for the fan base to be fully behind this team and believing that they can make a run. If that is what the next 10 days has in store for us, or 9 days, I think fans, actually no, 10 days, you got an off day. I think fans would actually be completely bought in that this team could find their way in a wild card round against the Dodgers. And then once you get through that, anything can happen. And I would want nothing more than for the New York Mets to clinch a playoff spot before they got to Miami. Even though I live in South Florida and can be there for them to clinch, I'd rather it happens beforehand. I don't even want that anxiety driving down to Miami in the final week of the season. I really don't. But I would want nothing more than the Mets to get past the Dodgers and to once again square off against the Phillies in the NLDS and to beat those smug Phillies with their broadcasters that were handing them a World Series trophy on September 15th. I'd love that. But the Mets got their work cut out for them to get to that point where this fan base is that confident. And it all starts tonight against Michael King. I'm going to preview the series to close out the show in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy. It's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And again, if you win, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets guaranteed. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks on the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways and a live graphic sent to your phone each day, so you're losing the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, let's talk about this series. Mets versus Padres. Coming out of the trade deadline, the San Diego Padres were the hottest team in baseball for a stretch. Remember, they swept the Mets going into the deadline, and then out of it, they won 9 of their first 12 games. So they had a run there where they had won 12 of 15. Then they got swept by the Dodgers, took a loss to the Giants before battling back and beating the Giants in that 4-game set. They then beat the Dodgers after that. So they had a 14-7 stretch to begin August, extended back prior to the deadline with that sweep against the Mets, a 17-7 stretch. But they lost their final 2 series in August. So their record for that month was 16-12. In September, they're 6-7. But 5 of those wins have come against the Rockies. They got swept by the Orioles and they lost the series to the Reds. So if you actually look back, the Padres have lost their last 4 series when they were playing teams other than the Colorado Rockies. They're without Xander Bogaerts, and Jose Iglesias has not been hitting. So they have now turned to a weaker defensive infield in hopes of having a better offense. So that means Jake Cronenworth has moved over to short. Luis Ariz has moved over to second. And at first base, you have Ryan O'Hearn with Manny Machado rounding out that infield. Now you have in the outfield Fernando Tatis Jr., Jackson Merrill, and Ramon Laureano. So far in September, Tatis and Merrill each have 4 home runs and are OPSing over 850. Merrill has been their best hitter lately. Luis Ariz has been batting .333 this month, but he also could be day-to-day. We don't know. I think it was on Sunday. He was hit in the head or the cheek by an errant throw in pre-inning warmups. So strange situation there. We'll find out what happens with Ariz. If he's out, you probably see Jose Iglesias. And the funny thing is, I think you'd rather see a batting champion, or a 3-time batting champion, than Jose Iglesias, just because we all just watched Harrison Bader. And even though Jose Iglesias this year, let's pull up the stats for Mr. OMG. He's got a .570 OPS, hitting .227 this year. He must miss New York a bunch. But that is the situation with this Padres lineup. They're not a terrifying lineup to face. They got good hitters, and they can definitely score runs. But this is not a team that is stacked 1 through 9 by any stretch. Where they're stacked is in their bullpen, and they have their best starters going in this series. You got Michael King going tonight against Clay Holmes, the former Yankees teammates. And then tomorrow, it's going to be Nick Pivetta versus David Peterson. Although Peterson, for whatever reason, has not officially been announced. I don't know if there's anything to that. Only thing that could be to that is if the Mets end up abandoning the piggyback strategy and starting Sean Manaea in a game instead. But I strongly doubt that that's going to happen at this point. Feels like they're pretty pot committed to going with Holmes to start off this game, with Manaea coming in bulk relief. And I will say there are 5 lefties in that Padres lineup, and they don't really play matchups that much. So that does play into the Mets' favor when it comes to Manaea pitching in relief and David Peterson going in the second game of this series. Now, when it comes to Michael King, he was hurt for a large portion of this season. Started off the year great. Through his first 10 starts, he had a 2.59 ERA. Then he had shoulder impingement that knocked him out until August. He made 1 start, and then during that start, he had knee inflammation and was right back on the shelf. He just came back, has made 1 start exactly a week ago. He went 5 innings, gave up a couple runs, got up to 63 pitches. So Michael King still probably is not full go. Maybe he's up to 75, 80 pitches, but the Mets should be patient. Well, I don't even know if he should be patient now I'm thinking about it, because their bullpen's so good. And they had a day off on Monday to rest that pen. So maybe not, but it'll be interesting to see how sharp King is. When he's on, though, this is one of the best right-handed pitchers in baseball. Nick Pivetta has been the Padres' ace this year. He has a 2.73 ERA and 180 strikeouts and 171 in a third innings pitched. So right now, these are the best 2 starting pitchers the Padres can throw out there, and you got to see them in this series. And then for the final game, you could go with Randy Vasquez, who would be going on 6 days rest, or playing the White Sox next. The Padres could start Dylan Cease on 4 days rest if they choose. So we'll see what they decide to do. The Mets likely go Jonah Tong in that final game of this series, and that is obviously a big question mark on what Tong will look like after that really disappointing start last time. Hopefully he can bounce back in a big way for this team, especially if he's pitching in a rubber match. And talk about draws that you can have in back-to-back starts. Jacob deGrom, then Dylan Cease. Those are some big names. Dylan Cease is not having the best of seasons, but it's still a big name and a guy that has big stuff. So we'll see. When it comes to what the Mets have to do in this series to get the edge on the Padres, I was thinking about the starting lineup a lot. You're going to have 3 righties go. The Padres' whole rotation is right-handed, especially since they sent J.P. Sears down to the minors after his last start. So what lineup do the Mets put out there against right-handed pitching? Lately, what they've been doing is you've seen Brett Beatty at third, Jeff McNeil at second, Cedric Mullins in center, and Mark Vientos at DH. I like Vientos at DH. I don't know if Cedric Mullins should start in this series, but I don't want Jose Siri out there. So to me, what I would do is I would lean offense and I would try to see what kind of a spark Ronnie Mauricio could provide. I know we haven't seen a lot of Ronnie, but in this series with 3 righties, what's the harm in going Ronnie Mauricio instead of Cedric Mullins? Cedric Mullins is not a great defender in center field anyway. I don't think that it is a massive upgrade having Cedric Mullins in center compared to Jeff McNeil. I really don't. And while Brett Beatty is your best defensive third baseman, Ronnie Mauricio is not a slouch over there. So if you have Mauricio at third, Beatty at second, McNeil in center, you still can play, with your bench a little bit. You'd still have Mullins if you wanted to go to him. You still have Marte off the bench. You still have flexibility, obviously, with Acuna as well. So the Mets could play it a lot of different ways. If there's a spot where a lefty is going to face Mauricio, all right, well, you can drop in Starling Marte, or you can drop in Jose Siri if you really wanted to, or you can drop in Acuna. So I think that might be the best option the Mets have. And if it works, you never know. But to me, I would go to Ronnie and just see what happens. He is the type of guy that is just an ignitable bat. And he could, get parachuted into a series and hit a big 3-run homer for you and flip a game. And I just don't see any power from Cedric Mullins right now. Now, Mullins, he does give you the best chance to probably get on base because he's in a little bit better of a rhythm than Mauricio. And yes, still technically some more speed in center than Jeff McNeil. I just think Jeff McNeil has a better arm and takes, better routes, gets good jumps. I don't think there's enough of a difference there. So that's one thing that the Mets can do to maybe change things up for this series. But it's going to come down to the big guys. Can the Mets have a big first inning in one of these games against Michael King or Nick Pivetta? Because that will go a long way to giving this entire lineup confidence and to give the starting pitcher confidence that they're pitching from ahead for once instead of always from behind. Can they jump out and blitz Michael King and Mark Vientos is hitting a 3-run homer and the Mets put up a 4 spot in the first? That would be huge. And maybe you can then carry that momentum throughout the rest of the series, honestly. If they could do that tonight, that would be a really, really good sign for this team. They got momentum after that Pete Alonso home run. How are they going to use it? That's the question of the week for the Mets. But they can't have a bad finish to this homestand because it could sink them. If they are chasing wins on the road next week, going to Chicago and then Miami, I don't feel good about the Mets' chances. But if they can find their way to beat the Padres and they can sweep the Nationals, they're going to be in such a good spot. And worst case scenario, they need a winning week. 4-2. At least do that, whether that's losing to the Padres and sweeping the Nats or winning both series. It's time to find out if you still believe in the New York Mets. We will see. That's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. Really appreciate all of you for tuning in. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Please hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. And thank you for making Locked On Mets your first watch or your first listen every day. Now, for your second watch, check out Locked On MLB Game, the show that'll take you around all the action in Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts and league-wide experts that'll take you through all the games. Check out Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel or the Locked On MLB podcast feed.